Ah, board games. The staple of any self-respecting family Christmas. An extra opportunity to harbour further grudges and resentment towards people society tells us we have to spend time with for a week in December. Actually, I don't really think like that. I love a good board game, and my family seems to be particularly gracious at accepting defeat when we play. Possibly because we avoid Monopoly at all costs. Or maybe it's because I'm the bad loser of the family but usually end up winning. Who can say? Either way, it's a board game I've chosen to focus on for project number 5, namely Tic-Tac-Toe, or Noughts and Crosses. Tic-Tac-Toe then? How original of you, because there aren't a billion different versions of that on itch.io already. Well, prepare to dine on some humble pie, my friend, because this is a tic-tac-toe with a twist. I mentioned in my last video that I wanted to do something a bit more manageable this month after the sheer size of the island and the intricacies of a shot in the dark, and a twisted tic-tac-toe seemed like a quaint and fun project to get stuck into. There's two main influences behind this project. First, there's a game I played on the iPhone years ago called Ultimate 10, which is effectively tic-tac-toe within a game of tic-tac-toe, tic-tacception if you will, i.e. 9 simultaneous games where if you win one of the smaller games, you claim that space on the larger grid. The winner is the first player to get 3 in a row on the larger grid. Cool idea, and one that I've probably spent far too many hours with. The second influence is a board game that I had as a kid, which was a physical 3-dimensional tic-tac-toe. I don't know whatever happened to it, but it was carved out of wood and used different coloured marbles which slotted into little holes on the board. It had a really aesthetically pleasing design, and I've not been able to find a replica of it online anywhere, which is a real shame. So project number 5 is basically a digital recreation of that board game and is simply called 3D Tic-Tac-Toe. I've gone for a very child-friendly aesthetic with the bright colours and chirpy music and limited options, the latter of which is purely to make it child-friendly and not at all because I can't be bothered to program an endless array of customisable settings. The mechanics are basically exactly what you would expect. Connect 3 of your shape in a row, column or diagonal. The first to do so is the winner. The first big twist, however, is the extra dimensions. As well as the standard 3 in a row across the horizontal plane, you can also get 3 in a row across the 3 different planes, both orthogonally and diagonally. Furthermore, there's the spatial diagonals as well, which is frightfully difficult to explain in words, so I'm hoping I've got a sensible screenshot here to show you what I mean. This adds a whole new dynamic to the tactics of this game, and means you have to look in significantly more directions for spaces to block, so going first doesn't necessarily give you a massive advantage, though in testing the build it seems there is still a small one. The second big twist is a natural evolution of having more tiles on which to play, namely, more than 2 players. It's amazing how adding an extra player or 2 once again changes the dynamic of the game. It sort of reminds me of the first time I played Rummy with more than 2 players. In a 2-player game, you know you're going to get a shot at every card as long as your opponent doesn't keep it, whereas with 3 or more players, you can miss out on cards you might be chasing and be forced to change your strategy. Back to Tic-Tac-Toe, I shan't go into a detailed analysis of the best strategies to play, mainly because I'm still not convinced I know them all, but one of the ways I found of beating the AI, which unlike a human won't miss a subtly hidden potential win, is to always try and set up your pieces so that you have 2 potential winning moves at any time. With more than 2 players, this still doesn't guarantee victory, but it's more likely to yield success than just hoping the computer's going to miss your setup, because spoiler alert, it won't. So let's talk about the AI a little bit more. Without any pathfinding and spatial problems to worry about, the AI was always going to be a purely logical challenge. I'm not wholly convinced that the solution I wrote is the best one. It's certainly not the most efficient, but for a relatively small game it does the job well enough. The AI basically has 2 rubrics prioritised in this order. 1. Can I place a piece such that I'll win the game? 2. Are any of my opponents poised to win the game on their next move? More often than not, one of these criteria is fulfilled and the AI plays the priority move. However, if neither criteria are met, the AI will place a piece at random. This last point, coupled with the fact the AI has to consider blocking more than 1 player and doesn't discriminate against whose turn is next or whether it's blocking an AI or a human, is the reason that AI isn't unbeatable. There's no AI strategy beyond playing a winning move and blocking a potential win. Don't get me wrong, it's still not completely straightforward. I'm yet to find a consistent strategy when playing more than one AI beyond try and play them off against each other, and more often than not that ends up being more luck than judgment. How the AI algorithm works is really boring and not really worth going into detail on, but it's essentially a brute force method. The AI will go through every combination of 3 in a row in every dimension and check to see if it will win if it places a piece within that combination. If it will, it plays there. If not, it will then go through every combination again, checking to see if anybody will win if they play a piece within that combination, again making the move as soon as it finds one. And since the AI checks the spatial dimensions in the same order every time, if you can figure that order out, I'm not going to tell you here because where's the fun in that, you'll know which dimension the AI is going to try to block off first, or more importantly, last, and plan to make your winning combinations in the dimension with the lowest priority. The logic here is that if there's another player in the game, the AI is more likely to block them off before they block you off. If I were to go back and make further changes and tweaks, I'd probably prioritise blocking off players whose turns are coming up sooner. Come to think of it, that would probably take me less than half an hour to implement. Maybe something to watch out for in a future update. Beyond that, there isn't really that much to talk about. I had fun using Blender for the first time in one of these projects by making the pieces. These are simple characters from a particular font which have been extruded to give them some depth. I mentioned Twitch integration in the last video, and did actually bodge together a simple version of it in an hour before one of my streams to try it out, and it worked well enough. However, I decided not to keep it in the final build, as the gameplay itself didn't feel particularly well suited to the Twitch platform. Don't worry though, I'm going to talk a bit more about Twitch integration very soon, I promise. The menu was quite fun to design. Initially, the AI-controlled players option was just going to be a number like the total players option, but it wasn't working out. Instead, I added tick boxes so that players can decide which of the players are AI. Initially, the human-controlled player defaulted to going first, so having the checkboxes just gave a few more options without any considerable extra work. This also means that you can theoretically turn all the players to AI and then sit back as you watch them battle it out. During development, I had an auto restart option, which meant I could set 4 AIs up to play, turn instant AI and auto restart on, and then leave them playing for as long as I liked. It felt ever so slightly like baby's first Black Mirror, forcing them to play 50,000 consecutive games of Tic-Tac-Toe whilst I went to the shop for an ice cream. On the plus side, it gave me some good metrics for how much of an advantage there is to going first with different numbers of players. So that concludes 3D Tic-Tac-Toe. It feels a lot tighter than previous games I've done and less prone to bugs, though I dare say a few will crop up in due course. It's curious how this one feels like the tightest, most bug-free game of all of them so far. Given hour for hour, it's probably the one that I've spent the least amount of time on. Funny how things happen. Anyway, let me know in the comments if you manage to find a solid strategy to beating the game consistently. On we go then to project number 6. Now, I've mentioned in the last 3 videos, I'm sure this one won't take me as long because I've already started it so you won't have to wait as long for the next video, etc, etc. Well, this time I can say that with absolute certainty because project number 6 was actually finished before project number 5, though of course officially it's not finished until I publish the video. This next game is sadly going to break the trend for games you can download from itch.io. Sorry about that. I'll explain more next time why I made this decision, but I think the rationale will be very clear and acceptable. I won't say too much more for now, but this one is very much a case of worlds colliding. It ticks one of the boxes for a style of a game I wanted to do for this project as well, so isn't just something arbitrary and me trying to make up for lost time. So all being well, the next video will be out a few days after this one, and I'll be actually properly back on schedule for the first time in months. Hooray! Until then, have fun with 3D Tic-Tac-Toe, and I'll hopefully see you in a few days' time.